What happened to the other human species? Wait, right now you're looking at the only human species left on Earth, like the only one. And that's weird, right? Because for most of human history, being human wasn't a single thing. It was like a whole family of different experiments walking around at the same time. Different faces, different bodies, different ways of surviving. But then, one by one, they all disappeared. And honestly, we still don't totally know why. Think about that for a second. Imagine walking around Earth 50,000 years ago. You'd see people who looked almost like you, but not quite. Some shorter and crazy strong. Some with heavy brows and bodies built for ice ages. Some living on islands who evolved into something that looks almost unbelievable. And then there was us. But here's the unsettling part. We didn't win because we were the smartest, the strongest, or the best at surviving. We won because everyone else just kind of disappeared. Which raises a genuinely disturbing question. What happened to them? Homo erectus. Okay, so let's start with the OG, Homo erectus, and I need you to understand something right away. These weren't some failed experiment. These people were actually incredible, like genuinely one of the most successful humans who ever lived. They showed up around 2 million years ago. 2 million years, and their bodies? Modern. Long legs, short arms, built to walk and run across open land. They figured out how to leave Africa way before we did. They spread across Asia, survived in crazy different environments, and lasted for, I'm going to say this and let it sink in, over 1 million years. Longer than Homo sapiens has even existed. Let that terrify you for a second. Their brains were smaller than ours. Their faces had heavy brow ridges and low skulls that would look alien to us, but they made stone tools. They hunted. They survived across continents for an absolutely absurd amount of time. And then, gone. The last ones we know about were on Java, an island in Indonesia. Somewhere between 117,000 and 108,000 years ago, the fossil record just stops. No big ending. No moment where we can point and say, this is where they failed. They just weren't there anymore. Maybe their populations got isolated. Maybe they couldn't adapt fast enough when the climate started changing. Maybe new humans showed up and outcompeted them. We genuinely don't know. But here's what their extinction teaches us early on. Surviving for a long time doesn't mean surviving forever. Neanderthals, then there's the Neanderthals. And okay, I know what you probably think about them. Brutish cave people, primitive, half-human, stupid. That image is completely, totally wrong. Neanderthals were not failures. They were a different answer to the same question. How do you survive an ice age? Their bodies were short, stocky, powerful, wide chests, strong arms, thick bones. Their faces had large noses and heavy brows. They were built specifically for cold climates where your body loses heat constantly and food is impossible to find. And they hunted big animals. Close range. Think about that. They'd walk up to giant ice age creatures and yeah, their injuries look like modern rodeo rider injuries. The kind you get from being way too close to something that could kill you. But they weren't mindless killers. They used fire, made tools. Evidence suggests they cared for injured group members. They might have used pigments and ornaments. They were people, just different people. For hundreds of thousands of years, they were the dominant humans in Europe, surviving the Ice Age, adapting, living. Then around 40,000 years ago, we show up. And around the same time, Neanderthals stop showing up in the fossil record. So the old story was easy, right? We arrived, we were smarter, we murdered them. End of story. But the real answer is so much messier. Neanderthals lived in small, scattered populations, and that's dangerous. Small groups can vanish from nothing. A bad winter, a failed hunt, a disease, a birth rate that's just slightly too low for a few generations. Ancient DNA suggests some of the last Neanderthal groups had low genetic diversity, meaning they were already vulnerable, already struggling. Add climate shifts on top of that. Warm phases, cold phases, animals moving, plants disappearing, the entire landscape rearranging itself constantly, and then we show up. Now, we probably weren't stronger. We probably weren't smarter individually. But here's what we might have been. More connected. Homo sapiens had wider social networks, long-distance trade, possibly faster innovation, better ways of connecting groups across huge distances. We could share solutions, pool resources, help each other. Neanderthals couldn't do that as effectively. So maybe, just maybe, they didn't lose one big war. They lost 1,000 small battles. Against isolation, against climate, against competition, against time. Denisovans, then there's the Denisovans. And the Denisovans are genuinely unsettling because they're basically ghosts. For Neanderthals, we have skulls, bones, tools, burials. We know what they looked like. For Denisovans, a finger bone. That's it. A single tiny finger bone found in a Siberian cave. Something so small it didn't look like it could change everything. But the DNA inside said, actually, you have no idea what was walking around Earth. Denisovans weren't Neanderthal, weren't us. Something else entirely. They probably lived across huge parts of Asia, Siberia, the Tibetan Plateau, maybe Southeast Asia. But our fossil record is frustratingly small. A finger, teeth, jaw fragments. That's literally all we have. We don't even know what their faces looked like. And yet, and this is where it gets wild, their genetic shadow is enormous. Some people in Oceania and parts of Asia carry Denisovan ancestry. Tibetans inherited a gene from Denisovan-related humans that helps them breathe in thin mountain air. Let that sink in. A human species that vanished tens of thousands of years ago is still helping people survive today. But as a living population, they're gone. We don't know why. Their range was probably huge, but their population's probably thin. They might have mixed with us in some places, been outcompeted in others. Climate probably shattered their habitats. And because we have so few bones, their extinction stays one of the foggiest mysteries in human history. The Denisovans teach us something uncomfortable. A human species can disappear so completely that almost nothing is left except code. Not cities, not monuments, not stories, just DNA. Homo floresiensis. Okay, now the weird one. Homo floresiensis. The hobbits. On the island of Flores in Indonesia, scientists found remains of a tiny ancient human. We're talking 1 meter tall. Tiny brains, tiny bodies. But they made tools, and they survived on an island with giant birds, Komodo dragons, and dwarf elephants. When scientists first found them, people didn't believe they were real. Are these sick modern humans, deformed people? But the evidence pointed to something crazier. They were their own human species, an entire separate branch of humanity, miniaturized. Islands do weird things to evolution. Animals shrink. Animals grow. Everything changes size because island ecosystems have different rules. That's called island dwarfism. And Homo floresiensis might be the most dramatic example of that in the human family. They lived between roughly 100,000 and 60,000 years ago. Their tools show up until around 50,000 years ago. That date is haunting, because modern humansis were moving through that region right around that same time. And then Homo floresiensis vanished. Maybe the climate changed the island. Maybe their prey disappeared. Maybe a volcanic eruption destroyed their ecosystem. Maybe we arrived and added pressure. But here's the thing about living on a small island. You don't need a global apocalypse to wipe you out. A chain of local problems is enough. Less water, less prey, more competition, one eruption, one bad generation, an entire human species gone. What makes Homo floresiensis so unsettling isn't that they were helpless. It's that they weren't even competing for the whole planet. They were just trying to survive one island, and even that wasn't safe while we survived. So the real question, why are we still here? And this is where the answer gets dangerous if we make it too simple. It's tempting to say we were smarter. But Neanderthals were intelligent. Denisovans adapted to environments that would destroy modern humans. Homo erectus survived longer than we have. Homo floresiensis survived in a world that would genuinely terrify you or me. So we can't just say intelligence. It probably came down to connection. Homo sapiens seem to have been weirdly good at building large social networks. Not just families, not just small bands. Larger webs of people, tools, ideas, and information. If one group failed, another could carry the knowledge forward. If one region became impossible to survive in, people could move. If one tool worked, it could spread to other groups. If one idea helped, it didn't get trapped in one valley. We connected. Other human species probably had culture. But we built culture that traveled, that changed fast, that connected more people across more distance. And when the planet became unstable, which it constantly did and mattered, a connected species can absorb shocks that isolated groups cannot. But even that doesn't make us destined winners. Luck mattered, geography mattered, timing mattered, population size mattered. Maybe we survived because we were adaptable. Maybe we survived because we happened to be in the right places with the right numbers at the right moments. Maybe it was both. Maybe it was neither and we just got lucky. The uncomfortable truth. Here's what I think matters. The other humans weren't stepping stones to us. They weren't unfinished versions of us. They were their own experiments, their own histories, their own ways of being human. Homo erectus after more than 1 million years. Neanderthals thriving through ice ages. Denisovans adapted to some of Earth's harshest places. Homo floresiensis surviving on an island with creatures the size of nightmares. They weren't failures. They were different. and now they're gone. Today, when we say human, we mean Homo sapiens. But that's only because every other meaning disappeared. We're not the peak of anything. We're the last branch of a tree that used to have many living branches. And maybe that should make us feel less superior, not more. Because if the other humans teach us anything, it's this. Extinction doesn't only happen to the weak. It happens to the isolated, the unlucky, the specialized, the outnumbered, the ones living through changes too fast to survive. And one day, if we're not careful enough, the last human species might learn the same lesson too.